to Product Academy Tough Stuff, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get straight to the toughest challenges in product management. I'm Tanja Lau.
And I'm Francesca Cortesi.
In each episode, we tackle one tough question. No fluff, no filler. Just candid insights from seasoned product leaders.
Our guests deliver actionable, real-world answers. Whether you're an experienced product leader or just stepping into the product world, this is your go-to podcast for sharp, tested advice, condensed for your busy schedule.
One tough challenge, practical insights, short and real.
Let's dive in.
Welcome, Justin. 6 years ago or 7 years ago, when I started Product Academy, a lot of companies were hiring excessively. There were lots of new job openings every day. And then we hit the global pandemic, we hit a recession. And nowadays, I feel like the job market has dried up quite a bit because a lot of companies are much more conservative about hiring or even laying off people. So there's a lot of experienced people on the market as well. But you have been one of the lucky people who have secured a PM job in the last couple of years. And your story is very special because you started out as a bartender in South Africa, right? And so my first question to you is, how did you convince someone to take a leap of faith and hire you for your first product role when you didn't have a lot of prior experience to show? What was your approach? How did you end up with your first product-related job?
That's a pretty huge question to fire off right at the beginning. So for starters, thanks for having me on your podcast. It's such an honor to be chatting about this topic, especially with you because you were actually quite an important part of this whole process. I worked as a barista, making coffee. The transition into product was like quite a kind of unusual one. It started off actually in the coffee space where I just hit the ceiling and needed to do something new. And I had this yearning to work in the tech space, but I didn't quite know how to make that transition. So it was a couple of things that I had to do. I started dabbling in building websites, meeting with clients, and really enjoyed the strategy space, but knew I needed to transition into a tech company. And that took roughly 4 years to make this transition. So first into a digital agency, and then at that point, I needed to find exactly what role in tech it is. And that's where I realized, hey, product management was it. So that was, I think, sort of 2022. COVID was in full swing. As you said, the job market was weird. It was really weird. There was layoffs left, right, and center. And as somebody trying to break into product, there weren't even meetups happening. So I remember where it really changed for me was when the market, I think when COVID kind of stopped and we could go out and actually meet product people, go to gatherings. And I think that is kind of what I use to build up my strategies, meeting with other product people, building a community, and then persistency and relentless applications over a period of a year and a half until I actually broke into product. That's it in a nutshell. But I'm sure we can get into some more details about how that actually worked.
Let's double click on some of these elements. Okay, definitely want to touch on the whole networking part, right? So you didn't have a huge network in product apparently at the beginning. So how did you go about that?
So in fact, I just moved to Zurich at the time, so I had very little network, period. So the first and obvious thing for me was to just go to meetup events, and that's where I discovered Product Academy, in fact, and that was like one of the few product meetups that there were. And so literally I went to every available event that there was, whether it was a bar night or a fail night or whatever product related event I could find. And I started meeting people through this. And basically anybody who was willing to sit down and have a coffee with me and tell me about their job is somebody I would have met. I didn't quite start applying for jobs quite in the beginning because I knew I needed to just understand the landscape first and understand the market. So I think for the first year, I didn't apply for a single job. I just started networking and growing to understand the people, how the industry works, understand what kind of different product roles there are. And yeah, and like you say, I I knew that the job market was a little bit strange, that macroeconomic conditions weren't really good 2022. There was a lot of layoffs from big tech, and not a lot of opportunities for like new product people. So there were no sort of associate product management roles. So I knew that fundamentally, if I was going to make any progress, I just needed to just have friends. In Switzerland, they call it vitamin B. Like it's all about relationships. And so because of my coffee background, I knew how to connect with people. So I always had a passion for people, working with people. I've worked in nonprofits. So I knew, okay, if I can build up the relationship, I can figure out what steps I need to take thereafter. So that was kind of my strategy. And then obviously when you do a course, whether it's on one of these online courses or an in-person course, you definitely meet people through these activities. And then also, I think the third thing that I used was actually just recommendations. So when people know that you're on the hunt and people know that you're curious, you get introductions. And when you ask for introductions, it's kind of interesting when you have like these what we call loose ties. So not your like immediate friendship circle. It's more like people who sort of know you. They have very little weighing on making a referral because they don't know you that well, so it's not their reputation that is at stake. And it's these networks and these people that actually made an incredible amount of introductions for me, from to not just product people, but to engineers, to co-founders. And then I think when you're talking about connecting and finding mentors, I don't think it's important to not just speak to product people per se. It's to speak to a number of people are in the product role, but also around the product role. And I think that is was kind of my approach to getting connected.
Okay, wow, thanks for sharing. It sounds like you approached this in a very strategic manner, right? So can you maybe tell us, first of all, what were your big learning goals? Because you did like some sort of discovery for a year, right, around this product
Yeah.
world. What were you trying to learn? And also, how else were you strategic when it came to your product job hunt?
Yeah, so in so I needed to first of all figure out what product management was, because believe it or not, I didn't even know such a cool job existed. I couldn't believe my eyes that such a job existed. So first thing was understand the actual job. What kind of product managers are there? And I needed to understand the build up like a decent amount of vocabulary. That's where books like Inspired came in handy because it just teaches you kind of the words and the lingo. But I think in that first year, the big thing that I really needed to explore is actually my personal identity. Because I believe, like, in your transition into product, you have to have a good sense of self, really strong sense of self. And now having broken into product, I see how much more important that is because you get pulled in every direction. It's an extremely stressful job. And it's that sense of self that really helps you thrive later on. And then as to the strategy part, yeah, so basically in a nutshell, what I did was I created this job hunt Notion page where I actually mapped out a strategy, or like this whole job search, and I kind of created it, or you could almost say like a product requirement document for myself, where I was like building out, hey, what is it that I would like to do? What kind of places would I like to work at? What kind of jobs would be really cool? And then I started taking these job ads, highlighting certain skill sets that they're looking for. And then I was trying to map them to courses I could do, YouTube videos I could watch, podcasts I could listen to, and books I could read to build up these skill sets. Because I knew I had no like serious tech background other than working a little bit as a web developer, and a lot of freelance projects. So I needed to slowly, like, strategically build up my skill sets. So that's kind of what I did. I started just strategically doing little courses and filling in some of the skill gaps. until I had the courage to actually start applying. But I didn't really, I would say my strategy only really started getting like serious after I actually started applying. Because only when you get feedback and rejections do you then realize, okay, there's some nuances to
Mhm.
this. There are certain jobs that are useful to apply for. And then you can like sort of dive down and iterate and improve how you apply. So
Okay. So
that's kind of
what were
how
the
I
first
approached it. Yeah.
Mhm. What were the first kind of jobs that you applied for? And also, what did you learn in those early iterations of your strategy? How did you tweak your strategy once you started
So
applying?
it's kind of funny. The first kind of jobs I did really well in the application process, and I got really confident and then quit my job, which is the biggest mistake ever because the market like got 10 times worse after that. I ended up being unemployed for like 9 months, which was really stressful. So basically, the first kind of jobs I applied for were just like product owner, scrum master, and any sort of adjacent role. But I tried to apply for roles where I had um, some interest in the role. But I tried to I kind of my approach was like if I meet 70% of the requirements, then I could apply. So I tried to be quite specific. And in the beginning, it was mostly around with or applied for products and companies that I really liked. So I had to like the product that they're selling or making, and I had to be somehow interested in the industry. That did, however, change at some point where I kind of cast the net a little bit wider. But that's what happens when you get like rejection after rejection, and you have to kind of iterate. But in the beginning, it was more like apply for companies I like in industries that I know, and um, and at that stage, I wasn't really thinking about whether or not I know people at those companies. But yeah, that was, I guess, my initial strategy. What was cool is in the beginning, I remember I had an application with this one mobile app company that's, I don't know, got a couple of million users. And I got like to the second round, and then I got rejected. And one of the things that was clear to the HR people that I was super junior was my salary expectations was about 20,000 francs lower than like the average idea what to ask for. Um, and the HR guy just called and I asked, hey, can I get some feedback? And the feedback I got from this call was absolutely incredible. And from that point onwards, it was my philosophy. Every single rejection, get feedback and iterate and apply that feedback and improve your application.
And what was the kind of feedback that was useful to you? How did it help you improve your future iterations of application?
Um, a couple of feedbacks that were crucial for me. One was like your personal pitch. Like I had a really terrible personal pitch because my background was in youth development and leadership development, and then in coffee, and people couldn't understand the connection to product. So I needed to really refine my pitch, and so I got a couple of people that gave me feedback on that, and then I took that feedback, went to my mentors, and practiced. Another bit of feedback I got, which was like quite painful actually. It was I got a personal referral, and I totally bombed the interview, the in-person interview. I applied for a job with the like a payments gateway, and I was just so obsessed with preparing for the technical details that would come in the interview and knowing the ins and outs of how payments work and how payment gateways function as a business, where the business model is, and so on. And by the time I got to the interview, had so much information in my head. I was like a nervous wreck. And they asked me some question about what would be my product strategy for something, and I just like went blank because I was so flustered from preparing and so on. And the feedback he said to me was like, actually, you need to just keep a simple approach to the way you answer questions and use a particular framework. And these opportunities come once in a blue moon, so you cannot waste these opportunities. And he gave me like a very hard pep talk, and I felt really like challenged by it. But it was those kind of like really hard and real authentic feedbacks that made all the difference, I think. And I think um, he was just like a very direct person, but I realized I could have gotten that feedback a lot earlier if I had welcomed that, not just from the recruiters, but also from friends and mentors. Yeah.
Mhm. Now, speaking about frameworks, did you use any particular frameworks to approach case studies or interviews afterwards? Was there anything you discovered that was helpful?
Yeah. So I watched a lot of these exponent videos, and I'm sure you can share the link in the show notes. Um, and like videos from guys like Diego Granados who share like these practical interviews, and they share a lot of these tactics like using the STAR method to explain what's it, situation, task, action, result, like to tell stories in a slightly different way or more compelling way. Yeah, I use a number of these frameworks just to um, yeah, just to practice. But the reality is no matter what the framework is, you can write it down and have like some cue cards prepared for yourself. But the interview situation, it's quite stressful and quite nerve-wracking. And I think getting practical sessions where you actually sit with somebody or like another product manager where they actually simulate the interview is a lot more helpful than just purely having a framework in the back of your mind. Because I've
Yeah.
been in many interviews where like it's just there's so much to think about, that I wish I practiced more with mentors or with friends or with fellow product managers. Yeah, that was something I could have probably done a little bit
Mhm.
more in preparation. Yeah.
And it sounds like you get a lot of knowledge from like watching videos, reading books, and so on. And you're like you were in sponge mode, let's say, right? You absorbed a lot of information about the product craft, and you still probably had to convince the first person who hired you that you can apply this information and
Mhm.
take good decisions based on it. And that's one disadvantage that you have when you break into product from a related role, or even from like totally outside of the industry, like in your case. How did you convince them that you didn't just know the theory, but you were the person to go for? Like, how did you, what kind of pitch did you have in the end? How did you map that to your personal experience?
Yeah. So that I think that's definitely the biggest challenge any aspiring product manager has is how do you like actually prove that you have the skill sets. Um, I think this is where like like I said earlier, if you have like this, you've done a lot of introspection and you kind of know yourself well and you know your story really well, you can kind of find this common thread or this golden thread in your career path and the kind of jobs you took before. And if you are able to thread that in a way or sell that story in a way that it connects with the company's vision and what they're about, that really helps already. And I actually have a in my little document, my product hunt document, I have a bunch of questions that you posted on LinkedIn at some point that I just added to my list of
Did I?
great questions to ask. And I think in this post, one of the things it said was that you need to prepare well for these interviews. And so one of the ways is get really practical about that specific company. And so you can, it would be great if you had some practical experiences. And of course, it's great to have like a little startup where you can, or some sort of MVP where you can practice some on a real case. Like for me, it was I had a side hustle called Coffee Elbow where we were selling coffee subscriptions and I was building up this product with some friends so that I could get some actual practice. That is without a doubt a great way to build up some practical skills. Um, but then obviously in the interview itself, you can demonstrate that by actually getting really practical about their product. So for the role at Urban Connect where I broke into product for the first time, I really dug into understanding their business really well. So I did a lot of research. I actually interviewed prospective customers of theirs. So I called some people that worked at companies that would have been clients. So they did corporate shared mobility for big corporates. And so I found like companies that were like, could have been their companies, and I've called people I knew and I was like, hey, how does your shared car fleet system work? Do you guys have like policies at your company? And I started interviewing them so that when I get into the interview and I have a case study, I could mention that I was proactive, that I did some user research, that I used the skills that I claim to have. I actually used it for this case study. It's kind of cheating, but I think it makes a lot of
No, it's
sense to do
not.
that.
I don't think it's cheating. Absolutely not. I remember then when I was hiring people for my team back then, I was impressed by the candidates who, for example, went through the entire process of buying something from the platform and returning it. And they were able to
Oh
point
yeah.
their finger at all of the parts of the process that were broken and where it hurt. And I knew that they went the extra mile to really understand how the process and the product works, right? So I really totally want to underline what you just said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been interviewing recently for facilitating some interviews, and I could see the clear difference between candidates who actually took some time to read into the business and didn't just have a great CV and cover letter, but they actually understand what you did or what you are doing, and they stand out instantly. Like you have to take this candidate seriously because you're like, okay, they actually want the role. And if you don't have the skills, you have to show that you have the desire and you have the passion and you
Yes.
have the energy that's going to make up for it. And you can say it in your cover letter or you can demonstrate it.
Mm.
And obviously, demonstrating
Yeah.
it would be a bit of a better
Mhm.
approach.
If you get to the stage where you can actually demonstrate it, because I just recently heard from a job opening where they posted it and like 3 hours later they had like 2,000 applications. And then on the other side, of course, there's a lot of AI-based screening of candidates. I heard people had their first interview with AI avatars they were talking to. Like this is what the job market is like at the moment in certain areas. So I was wondering, your first job that you got, was that more like a PM
Ah,
position, a junior, an
mhm, mhm.
internship? Like what was the first
Yeah.
role that you got into? And was that a strategic move? Did you have to make trade-offs to like enter the market, or like was it your dream job instantly?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at this point, yeah, at this point, I I was probably at about 80, 85 job applications. So pretty worn out from rejection. And also I had to realize or take a step back and reevaluate my approach. So I had experimented with a number of strategies, get referrals, try these LinkedIn automatic applications. Those didn't really work for me. And I started noticing that, okay, I get further in the process when I get a personal referral, definitely. I could measure it on my little tracker. But what I knew for sure is that if I get my foot in the door somewhere, that's all I need. So you can get your foot in the door as an intern, or you can get an adjacent role like in customer success and then transition to product. I've seen many product managers do it like that. Um, and so it was really hard for me to get into an adjacent role because of my lack of German skills. I wish I actually invested a lot more time into my German. So I knew that like the way I was going to break into product was unfortunately going to have to be directly into product. Um, and so I started applying for internships. I mean, I was over 30. I had done 2 internships when I was younger. I was just like not keen to do an internship again, but I just had to. And I found this role at Urban Connect that was an internship with the possibility of after 3 months converting into a role, a PM role, a full-time PM role. So I just had to start applying for these kind of roles. And there were some internships where the HR folks or the hiring manager said, like, look, this is not for you. Um, and in this role, I also got that criticism where they said, like, hey, you're a bit old for an internship. And I said,
Mm.
I don't care. I will work for this thing. Just give me a chance. So you kind of have to fight for it. And I think you just have to put your pride in your pocket and take whatever role you can get, especially in the current market. The pure amount of applications that there are. that you have to deal with, that you have to compete with. I feel like you just need to take whatever opportunity, and even if it's inside of your own company, I think even to volunteer on free projects. I did that at my previous company. Before I landed the PM role, I tried to become a PM at my current company. We didn't even have the PM function, but excuse me, we had an internal product. And on my weekends, I started calling customers and prioritizing make believe backlog. And I presented it to the internal stakeholders and I said, hey, let's productize this thing, let's build it out. And they said no, but I had to try.
And you did something, I
Yeah.
guess. But let's talk a bit about resilience, because I guess like you did more than 80 interviews, right? That's what you said before. So how did you build up the resilience to show up over and over again? I can imagine this is like really, it takes a toll on you. And I know of product leaders who have been on the market now for 2 years and they're now applying for like individual contributor roles because they can't get their foot in the door. It's like, it really changes you as a person, right? So how did you show up interview after interview? Were there any resources or people that helped you along the way?
Yeah, so I wish I had 80 something interviews. I definitely, at the
Mm.
end, I think I had 95 job applications, but
Ah,
the actual interviews were less than 10. And from what
oh,
I've
really?
like friends I've spoken to, um, they've had like much lower return rate than I have. And so, yeah, it's such a valid question. Every single PM that I meet that's on the job hunt, we have the same conversation, and I think it comes down to community. And I mentioned earlier, like you have to invest in yourself first and understand who you are and your identity and what you're about and what values actually matter to you. Because if you're gonna find your value in what a prospective job hiring manager has to say about you, it's going to be a very dangerous place to get in. You need to take care of yourself, both before you get the role and obviously after. I know you're a big proponent of that. So for me, it was like, hey, like build up this network of support. I had mentors through the ADP list. I got mentors through the Product Academy. And then I had some folks that were not in product that were just like my supporters. So I would tell them about my journey, give them regular updates, and basically they would just encourage the heck out of me because I needed it. And it's like the mental psychological challenge of this is probably the hardest part of this process. Some PMs take years to get into this role. Um, and I feel like if you take care of your community and you invest time in that development, you are going to see some returns. So if Eric Schmidt, Sergey Brin, Steve Jobs, all of them were like mentored by Bill Campbell, for example.
Yes,
They were
true.
spending regular time with him. Same like Roger Federer had a coach. Steph Curry has a coach, like a personal coach. Patrick Mahomes. I can go on and on and on.
Mm.
And so too do we need that. Otherwise, you're just going to be a little island on your own. And then the other thing is, in terms of resources I was consuming, it wasn't only product resources. Some of it was actually reading for that reason. So I was reading books like Grit from Angela Duckworth that was like helping me understand how I can persevere through this. Um,
Yes.
Anders Ericsson Peak, just to understand how I can actually grow and become a master of my craft. Because like right now, I feel like a loser because I get so much rejections. So I feel like, yeah, you have to build this community around you, and then you have to trust them to inspire you and encourage you, and that's what really carried me through this, through all of those rejections.
I'm happy to hear that. And we're approaching the end of the conversation. I just wanted to also mention there's a book, I think, called Never Search Alone. I don't know if you had read that one too, but it's also about like basically finding allies on this journey of job hunting. And yeah, I really hope that yeah, we can keep supporting each other in this community. And I hope that people will reach out to you afterwards to get maybe a little bit of an extra boost of courage and persistence from you, because your story is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of your your learnings, your experience. And I think we can link to some of the book titles you mentioned, but maybe you said you also have like a template for this Notion page on how to approach the job hunt. Is this something we can also share here?
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. Like some of these things, like you can build yourself, but yeah, I'm happy to share my little template. But what's important is that you actually have to just make it your own, really.
Yes.
And take it, break it, duplicate it, and make it your own. Because I think every one of us has a slightly different product trajectory, and I think you kind of have to build your community, build up your skill sets in a way that tie into your story, that build into your existing skill sets. And so yeah, I'm happy to share those resources.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I hope
Perfect.
somebody out there will find it find it useful. I think it's my responsibility to pay it forward. I think there's about over 50 product people that I met with that were literally sitting down to say like, hey, here's some feedback on your CV. Here's some feedback on this.
Yes.
This is what you could do. And that made such a massive difference to me. So I think all of us folks who broke into product at some point need to pay it forward. I think it's our responsibility to the community.
Yes, that's a beautiful ending to this conversation. Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing all of your experience with us, and best of luck for the future of your career. Talk soon. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, Justin.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Product Academy Tough Stuff.
We hope today's tough question gave you practical, actionable insights.
If you enjoyed the episode, do us a favor and leave a rating or review. It will help us grow the podcast and make future episodes even better.
Got a question for us? Send an email to toughstuff@productacademy.ch and ask away. We read any submission and might answer yours in a later episode.
Thank you again for listening. We'll see you next time with another tough challenge to tackle.
Until then, take care.